Welcome to the God's Eye Production Podcast. This is episode 12. Today we'll be talking about rest. We're going to try to keep this brief so that you can go out and you can rest. It's actually a command. So if we look in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days thou shalt labor and do thy work, but on the seventh day it is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, and it shall not do any work, nor thy son, daughter, manservant, maidservant, cattle, nor stranger that's within thy gates. 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all of them, and rested on the seventh day. The Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So in Hebraic tradition, Saturday is actually the Sabbath instead of Sunday like it is for most Christians. That actually happened because originally, after doing a little bit of research, that was Saturday for everybody, in Christians and Jews, but then later on, when the Christians were trying to win more people to Christ, they put it on Sunday to be able to try to win more souls. We'll have some show notes to kind of let you puzzle that out yourself, because as always, do your own research. So 6 days we're working, seventh day we're resting. So it's a command, it's an exodus. We're not under the law anymore, we're under grace. But if it's in the book, maybe we should consider it, if we're supposed to be followers of Christ. And here we're all about discipleship. So being a disciple of Christ would mean also having some disciplines and practices to sustain that relationship with Jesus. So with that said, you got to take a rest, because if you don't, your body's going to rest for you. Practical example, this past week I was getting one of our buildings ready for tourists to come in and people in the area, guests if you will. And I threw out my back, and it's because I have not rested like I should. So the point is, rest your body, or it will find a way to rest for you. It's the middle of April almost. It's still really windy, so you're probably going to get that and birds every now and then in the podcast. So I apologize in advance. So remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. In Hebrew tradition, it's called Shabbat. So Shabbat is Sabbath. It's the same thing. So let's go with some reasons why we need to rest. Sleepiness causes accidents. So biggest disasters in recent history was the accident at 3 Mile Island, the oil spill, the nuclear meltdown at Chernobyl, etc. All of those were a factor with sleep loss behind it. We don't have enough sleep and rest, because sleep is part of rest, but our attention's impaired, we're not alert anymore, we're not going to be able to learn anything. Also, it can affect your mood. So there's a whole lot of other things: gain weight, increased risk of death, impairing judgment, and that's sleep. But sleep is also tied to rest. This isn't a podcast on sleep. You can find those probably in multitudes out there. This isn't one about, be your best self, or have this in your diet to be able to live a better life. This is how are we going to walk out our life with Christ. We are the Talmudim. So the Talmudim is another way to say the disciples. So if you are a disciple of Christ, you're the Talmudim. That's the Hebrew word for it. How are we going to walk that out? And that's what this podcast is all about. So with all that said, those are just some things to consider. And even, Jesus said that he was Lord of the Sabbath. So if we look in Matthew 12, it's talking about how the disciples went through the grain field with Jesus and they were hungry. They basically just grabbed stuff off the stem and were eating it. And then the Pharisees were like, oh, they're working on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to work at all. It's the point in the Hebraic tradition where even the women aren't going to cook on that day. So whatever you got to do, you do the day before. So, it's Friday night. We got to get ready for the Sabbath. Do everything today. Get it done. Get it over with so that on Saturday we can rest. We can go to synagogue. We can enjoy fellowship with each other. I mean, even if you're a guest in the home, you're not supposed to do anything at all, just like we read in Exodus there. So basically, Sabbath is just a day of rest. Now, the days of creation. So 6 days of creation, seventh day God rested. Why would God need to rest? God is a spirit. Okay, great. But resting doesn't mean what we think it means. It doesn't mean that God took a cosmic nap. What it means is his presence resting over the earth, because the Sabbath is supposed to remind us of God, his glory, his power, etc. In Hebraic thought, you were to labor for the tabernacle for 6 days, and then after that, on the seventh day, you were supposed to just rest from all those labors. So how does that apply to us today? Well, if we're disciples of Christ, we're working on our interior tabernacle in our heart for 6 days, and then the seventh day we're reflecting on what God has done in that tabernacle in those 6 days through us, but also we're resting in God. So thank you, God, for allowing me to get my tabernacle more ready for your second coming, more ready for learning more about you, etc. Because you're on the seventh day, you're resting, you're in the synagogue, so you're going to learn more about God. Because in Hebraic thought, the more understanding you have, the more you'll love God. It's a little bit different from the evangelical tradition. So why is it not Saturday anymore and it's on Sunday? Well, after doing a little bit of research, that had to do with the fact that they were trying to survive in the Roman Empire. So basically, because of the Roman Empire, the Jews and the Christians were kind of together in their worship, because there were Messianic Jews, and they're the ones that believe in Jesus, and Judaism also has that day on Saturday as holy. So basically, as things went on, they realized that they were going to move the date because it was easier for them to get more followers. So the Christians kind of split off from people who were of Jewish descent, and it was partially because the way that the pagans worshipped in the Roman Empire, and there were some other factors. We'll include that in the show notes, that way you can do your own research, because always do your own research on things. I'm just kind of pointing it out, and if you're interested in that, you can puzzle it out further. So God didn't rest cosmically in his chair or something on the seventh day. The word is menuka. I think that's how you say it, and if not, I apologize. Rest is kind of a bad translation of it. It's a rest of love freely given, a rest of truth and sincerity, a rest of peace and tranquility and quiet and safety. Basically, it's the breath. So God rested on the Sabbath, meaning that he breathed into the Sabbath. So that's why we're supposed to keep the Sabbath and keep it holy. Holy in this case means to not make it common. So if we were to kind of work and do other things, that would kind of make it a common day, and it's not a day for the Lord. It's supposed to be dedicated to the Lord. So whether you do the ancient way with the Messianic Jews and the Judaism of doing it on Saturday or Sunday, you need rest. And when I say rest like this, I'm not talking necessarily, the way that Exodus says you're supposed to cease all things. Now, rest for you may be different. It is for me too. Like, rest for me is going down to the creek and making something out of weeds and rope and sticks. That's rest for me, because I'm beside the water, I'm praying, I'm doing other things. So that for me is rest. So technically, the Pharisees would be upset at me because I'm doing something on the Sabbath too. But for me, it's rest. So how do you rest in your life? Rest could be re-alphabetizing your spice rack. It can be other things. The point is, it's dedicated unto the Lord, and you're focused on the Lord. So, like I said earlier, your tabernacle's inside your heart's being built for 6 days, and then your seventh day, you're supposed to rest. So you remember what God has done, but you're also remembering to give honor where it's due, because a lot of people don't rest. Do you find it interesting how most of the events that happen on a Sabbath? So in America, kind of in American tradition, since it's on Sunday, football games are on Sundays, wrestling nights are on Sundays sometimes, pay-per-view things. They say, and I'm not condoning this at all, because it's just, I've looked at the data, and it's sad to say, but it's true. Pornography use goes up during the Sabbath kind of time. So people are looking to fill other things in their Sabbath time, to fill that void. So your body knows it needs rest. Your soul knows it needs rest. So people are looking to all these other things to give them rest and not looking to God. And so you wonder why your life seems kind of empty and devoid of meaning. Start off, make the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Saturday, Sunday, whatever you're going to do. If they're not against us, they're for us. So whether you're more the way that it was to begin with, and your Saturday dedicated unto the Lord, great. On Sunday dedicated unto the Lord, great. And I'm not necessarily just talking about church attendance here. That has been pushed into a lot of people's heads, and church attendance is great. but that will not save you. The only thing that will save you is Romans 10:9. Confess with your mouth Jesus is the Lord, believe in your heart, you will be saved. That is how you're saved. And again, if we're going to go for that way, baptism, water doesn't save you. It's an outward expression of an inward change. So I'm talking about having a place in your life where you are doing rest. It's a discipline. It's something that we need to do. Our society doesn't like it because it wants to be productive at all times. And it's just, we got to get it done. Great. Sunday, we got to mow the lawn. We got to do this. We got to do that. Okay, great. But you're not resting. And again, if you do not rest, your body will make you rest at some point. It may be 2 months and you're burnt out, but your body will make you rest. Why not do it the way that God said and take your day of rest? I mean, we rest from work anyway. I'm off this week. So even most work kind of is like, we're going to put you off because you need to rest. Because you're no good to us dead, basically. You need to rest. It's very important. So I'm not really worried about how you rest. That's between you and God. But you do need to rest. They have actually found that, I can't remember the study, and I may have to look it up, but basically it was a study done, and people who rest typically need about 2 hours, if it's just like a normal part of the week, of doing nothing. So, oh my gosh. So you're telling me that scholarly journals have confirmed what God already said that we needed to do? Oh my gosh, that is like so revolutionary. So it's even in the secular literature that you need to rest. So it was like 2 hours for like if you're during the week, and then some people needed 3 hours. And you see it all the time in like introverted people. So the people that need to read or they need to go get away from people for a minute, they're trying to take a Sabbath. That's what they're doing. They may not call it that, but that's what they're doing. Extroverted people, their Sabbath may be talking to people. So you have both of that. So in that, you have the quietness and the rest. So that's for the introverted people. And then for the extroverted people, we're going to go talk, at so-and-so's house tonight. Sister Mary cooked last night, so we don't have to worry about it because it's the Sabbath today. In the Hebraic tradition, it would be called Shabbat. It means Sabbath. It's the same thing. So don't get those two words confused. We're not really worried about idiosyncratic way of saying stuff. All I'm saying is that you just need to rest. And I'm preaching to myself here because I have a really hard time doing that. So I think that's the reason why God's put it in my spirit to talk about this. And speaking of which, I'm also sorry that it's been so long between episodes. I'm trying to make it sustainable for you and for me. So that's the reason why there's a lot of gap between the episodes sometimes. It's just so that we have time to kind of live it out, live our lives, and not get to the next thing. What's the next episode? So I appreciate your patience. It's also, things are getting kind of busy, so that's the way as well. But I'm also trying to do this at a more sustainable pace, because it's not about views, it's not about how many clicks, it's about people sharing with each other. It's about Sabbath. Because, I could stay in here and record 3 episodes every time I come in here and do this. But that's not going to be helpful to me, and that's not going to be helpful to you, I don't think. So I'm really trying to find a rhythm doing this. So if you've stuck with me through this part and through the rest of these episodes, I appreciate it. I also appreciate your patience. I'm trying to find a rhythm that works for everybody. Again, I apologize. The pace might be a little too slow, but I'm still trying to get a feel for all this. Anyway, getting back to it. So rest is very important. So, in America, we live to work. And in other countries, you work to live. And I think that's an excellent model. And I really wish we would do that here. And it's starting to change some, but it's still slow coming. And people are still focused on the productivity, on the mindset. A lot of people still have that industrial revolution mindset where we have to make these things and be the great country and all this stuff. And some of that stuff, unfortunately, has passed away. And I'm not being anti-American here, at least for my culture. I'm just saying that mentality is still there, but it's changing. And 4-day work week would be great. Being able to have maternity and paternity leave would be great. So things are starting to change here in America, but it's just slow. Like everything else, it's just slow because people don't see the value of it. So again, We're trying to get back more into the Sabbath. So having that day off, that could be somebody's Sabbath day. Even though if you want to get technical, oh, well, that's not the way it says it in the Bible. Yeah, you're right. But, you got to have rest somewhere. Your Sabbath may not be on the Sabbath day. It might be on a Monday, and that's okay. Our church does this song where they say, how many people got saved on it was on a Tuesday when I got saved. How many people got saved on a Wednesday? It was when I got saved. So the point is that, Sabbath can be what you make it. So everybody needs a little Sabbath somewhere. So try to squeeze a little bit of Sabbath into your day somewhere to begin with. But then I think you'll start to realize that it's actually a lifeline to you the more you do it. And we've talked about the Pause app before, John Eldridge, Wild at Heart, their ministry. Here in this My Jewish Learning, we emulate God whenever we relinquish our mastery over the world on the Sabbath by refraining from altering nature. For one day we declare a truce between ourselves and the rest of God's creations. That's all we're trying. That's all I'm trying to say is just have a place of rest, and you need it. So get in your prayer closet, go out on a hike, whatever you're capable of doing, wherever you find rest, and be willing to do it with others too, because that's part of it too. Do it as a community. You're not an island, and that's something that's hard to learn, especially in our connected/unconnected culture that we have today. Connected being our phones, and unconnected being that we're lonelier than ever. So there's Sabbath there, and there's rest there. Some people who are extroverted rest in others. People who are introverted rest in themselves. And when I say that, I'm not saying that with pride. It's more activities by yourself, sitting there thinking, reading, playing a video game, so on and so forth. Why not, when you're playing your video game, put on some praise and worship music, Why not do that? Part of your rest could also be making something new, painting something. Based on the way it is in the Hebraic tradition, which is where, Christianity came from, we're supposed to refrain from doing anything. There's 39 different categories of things you're not supposed to do. And that's great and that's fine. People sometimes need that stuff laid out. I'm not saying, oh, we got to be this, we got to do that. Part of the reason that stuff probably was laid out was because people are okay, well, what can I do and what can I not do? Because as well as I do, some people need that stuff spelled out. Don't do this, don't do that, and don't do this. And people are okay, I cannot do those things and I'll be all right. So in my mind, that's the reason why those categories, at least for some of the rabbinic laws, would have been like that. So it wasn't necessarily, oh, you're doing it wrong. Originally, the intention behind it, because we got to look at the fruit, we got to look at the heart motive behind it. So maybe that's the reason why, is because they needed it spelled out exactly what to do. Because you go to your pastor, say, I need help. What should I do about such and such? And sometimes they'll spell it out. All right, have you tried this? Try this next. Try that. And then try this, look up this Bible verse, look up that Bible verse. So it's kind of the same thing. People get hung up on the law, legalistic people, because they don't want to live beyond it, because they're afraid to, because they don't think about the great speckled bird that covers people up from going too far. God will let you know when you go too far. If you earnestly seek Him out, not sticking to your own stuff, God will let you know, hey, don't do that. Okay, I won't do that. Or you'll do it anyway, and then God's all right, well, here's the consequence of what you did. That's something to consider. But again, we're earnestly seeking God with this kind of stuff. We're not just doing it in a kind of a silly kind of hee look at me kind of way. So let's look at a couple verses really quick. Hebrews 4:9-11. There remains then a Sabbath rest for people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from His. Let us therefore make every effort to enter the rest, so that no one will perish by following their examples of disobedience. So it's a command. And I'm not trying to be a Pharisee here. I'm not pointing out, oh, you're wrong by not resting or whatever. Not in that way. It's look, you need to rest sometimes. Because even God's dude, you got to rest. And if you don't, as I said, your body's going to rest for you. So are you going to throw you back out because you did too much the day before on your job? Or are you going to rest and be all right, I'm going to do that part tomorrow? And if you think about it, part of the problem that we have is nowadays, people are so busy, we don't want to be idle at all. Oh my gosh, revenge, bedtime procrastination is the English way to say that Chinese word. It's I'm just going to stay up watching YouTube or TikTok or whatever for 3 hours past my bedtime, get up the next day, go to work, probably get fired. Let's be honest, you do this multiple times and you're your work suffers, there's going to be consequences of some type. Maybe not a firing, but something's going to have to change. So we don't want to be in our own head because we don't like what's in there. We don't want to confront it. So we're going to just play on our phones all day so we can avoid our stuff. And that's great and that's fine for a little bit. Look up, oh, well, hey, check it out. Look, the price of that thing went down on that one website. Great. But we don't need to get stuck on that stuff because it can become an idol. And it can be an idol that's keeping you from rest. If you're not going to find a way to rest biblically, it'll probably happen unbiblically. So how many addictions that people have in the world get started because people aren't resting in God's provision of rest, and people take one little sip of alcohol, or you look at something you don't need to be looking at, or you're doing something that you probably shouldn't be doing because you're trying to fill that place in your heart that needs rest. So basically, if you're not resting, your body's going to find a way to rest, and then the devil can also help you rest too. You're going to get into something you probably don't need to get into. Like I said earlier, Sunday, at least in the evangelical tradition being the Sabbath, a lot of things are happening. I mean, the football games are happening, and I'm not dogging ball sports. If you like ball sports, awesome. If you don't, awesome. But is it becoming so much a part of your life that it's taking you away from your relationship with God? And only you can answer that. Again, I will sit down at a high school ball game. I will watch my wife's kids play when I have a chance to. So I'm not against ball sports, but is it taking away the rest that God provides? Now maybe you have a kid, and that is your rest. Great. That's great. Absolutely great. Again, not dogging ball sports. I used to play basketball when I was a young guy. I mean, I'm 6'5". So, I mean, I was the center. I got the rebounds. I got the ball off the backboard. I passed it to the point guard. We got points, so on and so forth. So I'm not dogging ball sports when I say that. So with that said, can you rest in the ball sports? Can you find God in that? Or is it just something that you're doing to distract yourself? So we will distract ourselves. That is our body's way of resting. Ooh, well, look at this shiny thing. That'll be my rest. Okay, great, fine, but it's going to be empty, and it's not going to be true rest. Don't let the enemy take away your rest. You're going to be, why am I so anxious? Why am I so nervous? Why am I so fill in the blank? Well, the stuff that you're trying to rest in is probably not the stuff that you need to rest in. It's probably stuff that is taking you away from God. God is rest. And it's hard when you're driven and you have these goals and you think God's in it and blah, blah, blah this. But you still need rest. So, rest. Rest in God's rest. A couple of things for you to ask yourself, and we'll close. Am I resting in my body? Am I resting in my mind? Am I resting in my soul? Because all those things are connected. Here in the West, we try to separate them, but if you're from a different culture, you know that those things are interconnected. Unfortunately, here in the West, people are just now starting to realize that again, after a couple 100,000 years or however long it's been, where it was connected and suddenly we kind of disconnected it from reality. So those things are important. Is what I'm doing resting in God or resting in me? Because if it's resting in you, it's probably not real rest. Oh, it might feel like it, but I find that when I rest in myself, it kind of feels almost like a pill. So if I'm like really nervous, I might take something to make me calm down. I don't know what that is, fill in the blank for you. And it's good and it's great, but your body is rest, but your mind's not resting. It's still going 100 miles an hour. So so it's a medical rest. And so it doesn't feel like full body. It kind of feels empty and substance-less. Anytime I felt like I've really rested in God, I rested in His presence, it always feels good in my mind, good in my body, good in my soul. So it hits all those parameters. And only you can answer these questions. Mindlessly scrolling through social media, that's great and that's fine to do, on occasion, but are you constantly doing that for hours and hours and hours at a time? Is that really resting? Do you feel restful the next morning after you do that? Again, only you can answer that. I rest well with others. I rest by myself. I am an introvert extrovert, so I'm an ambivert, so I can do both. So I get rest when I'm talking to people and sharing in genuine connection with people. and that's where I get my energy and get my rest. But I also know the value of going somewhere quietly and praying, looking at a stream, just staring at the water, taking a hike, doing what I call prayer talks with God, where I'm just hiking for miles and miles, it seems, and I'm just laying everything out to God. That's my rest. That's a Sabbath for me. And the final thing I'll say, so that you can go out and do your own rest, is you need to be in a community of believers. Now, whether that's online, whether that's in a church, do what you feel like you need to do. But you need to have Sabbath with a community of believers, just so that you can share in each other's struggles, triumphs, etc. And I realize that might be hard for some of you guys. If you're around, for instance, in my case, if you're around a lot of people who are not kind of your age group, or maybe they don't have your same personality type. We talked about that last week. But also you have the people who aren't necessarily, in my case, on the spectrum, versus people who are kind of, I don't want to say normal, because I feel like that's a stereotype and that's virtue signaling, and I don't want to wave the flag of, hey, I'm autistic, all you autistic people come to me. I'm not trying to wave that flag at all. I'm just saying that for whatever reason, it might be hard for you to find a community of believers that kind of meet your needs as a person, and that's okay. But pray about it and try to find those people. God will lead you to them in the appropriate time, because you really need to have, it's not just accountability and all that stuff, you just really need to have people that you can share stuff with. Spiritual things. And if you're a new believer especially. But the problem with the old believers too is they feel like they're an island sometimes and nobody is up to their level and all this kind of stuff, and that's not true. That's just the devil trying to separate you from old believers if you're a new believer, and new believer if you're an old believer, and vice versa. Just realize you're not an island. You need to be with others. God created us to be beings of relationships. Whether you like it or not, we are created for relationship. We were created for a relationship with Him, so you need to find people around you who you can talk to spiritual things about. And if you're new to this and you're a new Christian, I'm not dogging you at all. Just, God, I'm new. Hold my hand. Help me to find the people that are going to get me closer to you and not get off the rails. Old believer, God, help me to find people who know more about you and who are humble, to be able to teach me the things I need to learn to help the younger believers. So relationship is important. That's also part of the Sabbath, because they would go into each other's houses and they would have fellowship, etc., etc. So just don't give up. Keep praying about it. God will lead you to the people. Just earnestly seek that. And it may be online, and maybe you can meet in person, and maybe you guys can start your own little group where you all go play the piano at somebody's house and you talk about spiritual things, of God and just all that stuff. So just find those people. Just be willing to make a connection. If you're an introvert, you can find people who are like you, who have the same energy level, who have the same color like we talked about last week. So just try to reach out to those people and just prayerfully consider, God, I'm trying to find these people to have Sabbath with and fellowship. But also know that for you extroverts, also know the value of spending time with yourself. When I was younger, I wanted to be with everybody all the time, because that would mean that I wouldn't have to deal with my own issues, because I could deal with everybody else's issues and not deal with mine. And that's part of growing up, I think. That's part of being young. But know that you're going to have a little quiet time every now and then to reflect. Because if you don't reflect on things, it's not going to be productive for you. And going back to what we said, we're talking about rest. So rest with others, rest with yourself, rest with God. So anyway, that's what I felt was laid on my heart for this podcast episode. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it gives you an idea of what to think about. And again, it's not a checklist of things that you have to do. It's just things to consider and things to think about for the week. So just realize that rest is important. Even if we want to do it in the secular way, rest is important, because it keeps our bodies from tearing down so fast. Why are people so sick? Why Why are people so depressed? Why are people so anxious? Why are people so fill in the blank? It's probably because they're not resting. So with all that said, thank you for joining me. I'm not exactly sure where we're going next week. I think I have an idea, but I'm going to have to prayerfully consider that. Go out and rest, and we'll see you next time.